The 15th chapter. I heard a knock at the door today. It was the monster. He had stopped by previous times to take me up on a rain check for tea. I felt awful for turning him down so many times before, and today I decided to finally let him in. There we sat in my parlor, catching up on the adventures we had apart. Eventually his tone changed, as he felt we had some business to take care of. He told me most curtly. I looked directly into his eyes, which were not much different than my own. Observant, a little sad. My features did not stray far from his, but he made the room less inviting somehow. The darkness, ever present, urges us to shake hands. Then I am sitting where he was, and there is no one where I had been. Excerpt from an old Obstrusion tale. Deicide was alone in his war room. The lights were low, and the abyss had stretched herself out on the forward wall and into the overhead behind Deicide. Her oily tendrils hung from the lighting and rafters like a black creeping web. He was seated at a large oval table while the abyss spun him around with a black tendril. Behind him, partially obscured by the abyss, was a large chart of the universe they were currently venturing through. He waved his hand over the armrest to activate the holographic controls for the wall display. He continued to zoom further and further out to view the space he had covered in his lifetime, highlighted in blue. He grinned when he thought of the marvel that was his Yolopile. He felt Nott had given him the greatest gift anyone could ever receive. Every hour of the day she would take exorbitant amounts of matter into her holds, using the raw resources to increase her size. Stars, planets, asteroids, all crushed like trinkets and scoffed inside her metalworks to be smelted and crafted. The deathless fought and rounded up any inhabitants they came across. The Yolopile was like an enormous snowball that increased its size with every rotation. He let a sigh escape from his chest, and then allowed himself to be twirled in his chair again. Deicide turned his thoughts to the power vacuum created by Nott's departure. It still hurt him to think about her being on the ship, and yet never being able to see her. Rightfully, the twins deserved to take on Nott's authority. It was what they had been groomed for, but Deicide did not favor their tone. They spoke to him as if he was some adorable mascot, a pet, which would rally the troops before a battle. The Yolopile had been created to serve his aspirations. It had been him alone who had spilled blood to protect Nott and the Yolopile in their rough beginnings. He recalled the countless times he had returned to the ship, having had his appendages lopped off or been blinded by an enemy attack. In those early days there existed no quick cure for limb rehabilitation. He had to endure the slow knitting process, as the spare carcasses had been used for fuel so the Yolopile could dive into this dimension. He stopped turning as the abyss amplified the sound of someone approaching. The great door slid open to reveal Hellmouth. She had her digital organizer tucked under her arm and placed it near her designated chair as she passed. She sat in Nott's chair next to Deicide and twisted him until he was facing her. Hellmouth looked into his eyes a moment before she spoke. "No one's out to get you," she said. "The twins are. They want to make me a hand puppet," he said. "They're just trying to step up. They want to be what Nott was to you," she said. Deicide's eyes widened. He grew tired of people speaking about Nott as she were dead. Deicide blew an icy fog from between his teeth. "Do I need yet another mother?" Deicide said. "Few are worthy of talking down to me." "We just want to help. You were always a smart kid, but nobody can do it on their own. Even Nott had an army of thinkers, and she was a genius," she said. Deicide sighed and nodded. "Now what are you going to do to make this right?" she said. Deicide leaned in to kiss her cheek, just as she took hold of his antennas. "Don't you ever try to punk me in front of the recruits," she said. "Ow! All right," Deicide said, before she released him. Then she tapped her dimpled cheek with an index finger. Deicide kissed her, and relaxed in his chair, groaning at the abyss's choir of giggles. His antennas were the most sensitive parts of his body, more than his testicles, or the fine hairs on his neck. Squeezing them was the equivalent of punching a bear in the nose. It took restraint not to lash out at the person that did so. He rubbed his watery eyes as Hellmouth returned to her seat. The door slid open again, and Great White and Ica stepped in and gave the pair questioning looks. "What's the matter? Mama slap you?" White said, showing his fangs as he chuckled. He sat on the edge of the table, poking Deicide in the chest. "Leave him alone. We're fine," Hellmouth said. Ica crept into his seat just as the rest of the executives and heavy brass showed up. Everyone piled in and volleyed greetings. The military filled in the chairs on the left, the suited executive officials on the right. Deicide sat at the front where the table was divided. His eyes crept over to the empty chair next to him, then upward to the next two. Destra and Sinestro were making their way around from the executive side, as it was a minor faux pas to stand on a side that you do not belong to. The same applied for presentations. Destra paused at Notch's chair, looking down at Deicide. He motioned for her to sit and turned to some notes he retrieved from his breast pocket. The stenographer program gave a long tone to notify that the minutes were being recorded in visual, audio, and text media. "First order of business," Deicide said. An unseen man with a booming voice spoke. "The court recognizes and promotes Chief Manager of Supply, Wayriana Hedron, to High Quarterer, Wayriana Hedron," the speaker said. Everyone began to clap as the woman standing made a small curtsy. "All right, so Caracal, you're her mentor. What's her title?" Deicide said. "Wayriana the Whittler," she said. "The Whittler?" Deicide said, looking around the room. "This is a civilian sector. We can't all have names like the Brave or the Edge. I think it fits," she said. "Whittler it is," Deicide said, gesturing for Wayriana to sit. "So supplies absorbing the archives?" Wayriana nodded quickly. "Yes, sir," she said. "We're keeping it staffed with the original archivist, though we are taking on a few new people." Deicide shrugged. "You know what's best," he said. The meeting continued in good spirits until someone mentioned the Nazareth, a ship that Deicide had declared openly as Yolopal's nemesis. The founding members of the Nazareth's crew were also plank owners of the Yolopal. The mutinous schism began in this very room, when Knott had proposed a new plant array system. Many balked at her presentations, saying her schematics for the districts bordered on slavery. But Knott had her way, and those that disagreed were asked to leave. Some decades later, during a heated battle, portions of a ship emerged through holes torn into their reality. They fired upon Deicide and his troops, causing them to suffer heavy losses. Since then, it was only Deicide's staff that had held him back from chasing the Nazareth through the stars like Ahab. Since then, they had only peeked through to throw potshots at his eaters. For now, the Yolopal had ways of dealing with her. "These are just pop quizzes. What happens when they use what we won't?" Deicide said. "I'm sure they don't have negation technology yet," the general said. "I had a negation shell shot at me in that tunnel. Tore off a fourth of my chest. Rebels cobbled that together. The Nazareth has personnel who sat where you all are sitting right now. Some of them were brilliant, and they worked for Knott. They know our secrets," Deicide said. "But the amount of resources you need to create it would be exorbitant," Sinestro said. "You'd have to be harvesting planets. Nations don't give away that type of wealth," Deicide said. Everyone nodded in agreement, while Deicide stewed in his seat. The abyss began to ripple slightly above their heads. Everyone was speaking as if they would never have to come into actual contact. Their lazy hypotheses would be his reality. He refused to let his children become casualties in a war that would last all of time. The abyss's eyes met his own as she parsed the voices having separate conversations. His eyes locked onto one of the assistant administrative secretaries sitting off to the side as the abyss began to coil and Deicide rose from his seat. He could hear jokes being passed that he did not care for. "Aunt! Hey, sign that for me," Hellmouth said. One of her enlisted aides was beside him, holding a digital document for him to sign. He blew an icy mist from his nostrils and scribbled his signature on the digiready, knowing exactly what Hellmouth was doing. His lips were tight, mouth puckered like the sphincter of some human crash dummy. He sat back in his chair, annoyed that the young woman was still crouched near him. But she was a pretty item, violet-headed, brown skin. He leaned over and lifted an eyebrow. She aped his facial gesture, and then he shot another glance at Hellmouth. The military aide scratched the back of his hand, and then returned to the sidelines. He knew Hellmouth must be extremely desperate in her psychoanalysis to use a woman, one of the sisterhood, to goad him out of his present mood. He detested this type of manipulation and continued to brood for the rest of the meeting out of spite. But he made sure to remember the name tag of the aide.